Spam calls are a nuisance nobody seems to know how to fix. Personally, there isn't an app I haven't tried over the years, nothing's worked. And if my camera person can zoom in, it's barely 11 in the morning at this point in time, I have already received a bunch of them. And this is, of course, not a lone case. As per a survey done by local circles, more than 60% Indians reportedly received 3 or more pesky spam calls on an average every day during the last 12 months. And it is not just a nuisance in the sense that it's not just something annoying that you have to deal with on a daily basis. It's also used by scammers to scam you out of your money. So we thought, why not talk to an expert and find out why the spam calls continue to ring phones unabated, why TRAI's efforts aren't yielding results, and also to find out if this is quintessentially an Indian phenomena. I'm joined by Parag Kar, technology expert. He's been the VP of Government Affairs, India and South Asia, Qualcomm. Thank you for taking out the time, Mr. Kar. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Kar, spam calls are a nuisance we're all sick of. There's nothing that people haven't tried to stop getting these spam calls, but it seems every time the culprits end up finding another way to get to you. How's this happening?
See, look, with the evolution of technology, where mobile phones has become the hallmark of communication and connecting to people from one point to another, with one person to another, it becomes very easy for anybody to reach out. It is just a phone call away. Now, typically what was happening is that initially these medium was used for marketing purposes because it is much more easier to reach out to people rather than basically use another means of communication or advertisement where TV and other medias are used. You can directly call people and talk to them about your product. So that is one way of reaching out to people and use that as a means to advertise your product. Another way is that it has become a big menace is that people are using this media to defraud people, right? Using and extracting money
Yeah.
out. Because mobile phones today has become a medium for doing commerce and banking transaction. Now coming to your question, why spamming is not getting controlled? Because this is more a technical issue as well as a geopolitical issue. Let me explain what this
Right.
basically means. Technically, from a technical point of view, what happens is that there are various limitations which cannot be contained or controlled by neither the technology people nor the regulator. So that is one piece of it. We will explain and go into deeper as we move in this particular
Sure.
call.
I mean, as far as the layman is concerned, the government should be able to control this. Operators should be able to control this. Now, what we have seen in this case, neither the government nor the operators have been able to control it. And in fact, add to that another layer, and that is the layer of third-party apps, which claim that they can help you sort of deal with this nuisance. So if you can, from the point of view of those three elements, the government, the operator, and of course third-party apps, if you can, describe to us why they have not been able to control this.
So as I was mentioning that there are two dimensions to it. One is technology, another is the geopolitical situation, which is more linked with jurisdiction. Now, this
Right.
whole telecom space is not limited to just India. Before I come to the technical, please let me explain the geopolitical issue. It is a
Sure.
connected network, right, across every part of the world. People are communicating with each other using this particular media, right? Now, because the Indian regulators and the government jurisdiction is only limited to India, they don't have a jurisdiction across the world where the calls basically emanate into India. Therefore, whatever they can control is within the limits of our country. That is the one piece of the problem, and we can go a little more deeper into this particular issue as we move into
Sure.
this call. The other problem is the issue about technology. And let me explain what I basically mean. Now, mobile phone has evolved over a long period of time. It's a 50 years old technology. Unlike in case of internet, which is a recent phenomena. The problem with mobile phone is that when the technology basically was introduced, when it got discovered or invented, at that time it was an understanding that whoever is managing the network or the operator is a trusted agency, means it can be trusted. Whoever is into the network is a trusted entity, right? So when you are using the network to call one guy from another or route a call from one person to another, you are fully trusted and you don't have to verify the origination of the call. Means, unlike in case of internet, everything is untrusted and you are authenticating the user from the very beginning. In case of mobile phone, the authenticity of the user is not verified because the technology doesn't have the means to authenticate the user. Means if I am calling as a spammer or a marketeer, you can't authenticate me. There is no means to authenticate me because the current technology does not allow that particular mechanism to get integrated into the system where authentication can be done. So the user becomes anonymous. When the user becomes anonymous, he can actually misuse the system to do all kinds of frauds. That is the basic problem as far as technology is concerned.
Now, if you can talk about, what is being done internationally, like how other countries are dealing with this problem, or this is just a problem which is a problem in India and not so much in other parts of the world.
Other parts of the world also are facing similar situation that we are facing in India. There is no difference, right?
Right.
Now let me go step by step to explain to you what the remedial measures are being taken as well as whatever is taken in India. Now, what happens is that, as I told you, that this is an interconnected world and we are using a mobile system which is based on legacy technology, right? Where the users cannot be authenticated. Whoever is calling, his identity cannot be authenticated from the beginning of the call. Now, what happens is that if you are a part of a local jurisdiction, for example, India, and all the operators who are operating in India, for example, Bharti, Airtel, etc., you can have regulation as well as the policing agencies to come out with strict laws and rules which can contain the system in such a way that people tend not to misbehave. Means, let me explain what I mean by this. Today, the basic problem that we are facing is that the mobile phones whose purpose is to use it for private purpose is using for commercial purpose. That is one problem. For example, the private numbers are used for commercial purpose. Let's say if you're getting a call, you don't know whether it's a marketing call, whether it is somebody trying to reach you. So that
Right.
is the problem that you're facing. That is point number one. The second problem that you are facing is that the identity of the user is getting cloned or changed, which is called spoofing. And how
Right.
the spoofing happens? The spoofing happens because of certain PAVX exchange or the VoIP exchange, which has got the capability. Normally, an user who is connected to the mobile network doesn't have the capability of spoofing the CLI or the identity of the call or the number of the call, but VoIP exchange and the PAVX exchange have the capability to do that. Now, regulators have control only within the jurisdiction of the country. So they can do what? They can come out with strict measures, penalties, or jail terms, or disconnections threat. And they can contain all these PAVXs and the IP switches or the VoIP entities so that they don't do any kind of spoofing. So that is the jurisdiction that Indian regulators have, right? So they can do that. But what about the identity of the person who has secured those SIMs or the mobile connection using, a cloned identity or identities which are, you can say that, forged. So if I am a user is using a private number to call, and I don't have the spoofing capability, but I am calling using a identity, which the mobile number which I have acquired using, nefarious means or cloned document or forged document, then I don't really care whether my number is getting disconnected or not because somebody else's identity I've been using to call you. You are
But
not sure
but
about.
definitely when it comes to, SIMs, perhaps, certain steps can be taken to ensure that people without a very valid, very legitimate proof identity are not able to, buy these SIM cards in the first place.
Correct. So this is the way the things have to be managed. There are multiple steps by which the cleaning of the system has to be done. Let me go by one. And even if you do
Sure.
that, what kind of loopholes still exist in the system which cannot be managed? We will talk about that. First
Okay.
thing, you have to manage your own uh, territory, that is India. So what can you do? You can ensure that the mobile phones which are acquired by a private users are acquired using true identity and nobody can forge the identity. So it is not easy to get a mobile phone without proper KYC done. Once if you ensure that at least one level of problem is solved, because so many regulations TRA has come out with, where if anybody misuses his mobile phone, his connections can be disconnected, and he's not only his connection can be disconnected, but he can face punitive action for a long period of time, where he will not be able to use any kind of communication resources, right? So that is one way of containing it. And for that, you have a foolproof system where mobile phones cannot be acquired using forged identity. That is one. The second step that you have to take is that all the PABXs which has got, or the IP switches which has got the capability to spoof the identity of a call. For example, I have a number. I can change the number, and as if that when I make a call using a PABX, my number identity can change, my CLI can change. So those exchanges have the capability. Normal user doesn't have the capability, but the PABX and IP switches have the capability. So those companies who are getting those PABXs as a business users, those companies have to behave responsibly, and TRA already has many regulations to prevent any misuse of their PABXs, and therefore you have seen that calls emanating from these PABXs have cut down to large extent when TRA has come out with these kind of rules and regulations. But now comes the problem. The problem is that, as I told you, that Indian regulators jurisdiction is within the country, that is
Right.
India. You do not have cross border jurisdiction. Now what the spammers are doing today, they are using the international route to enter India using the gateway, which is, the gateways are what, where the calls terminate from foreign countries and enter into India. Now this problem is very hard to solve. Let me explain why. Typically, what happens is that when do you receive international calls? Somebody calling from outside our country, entering into the Indian system and using and hitting an user. That's how the calls are received, and you call outside the country. But what happens is that the Indian spammers or the fraudster, what they do is that they use the internet path to get out of the country and use a jurisdiction which has got laws and regulations which are not that strong in India. For example, they can go to any other country, because there are so many countries which have the capability to connect into India, because where you can dial from those countries into India. So if you go and hit a PABX or an IP VoIP switch there, and from that you enter our country, either using a foreign CLI, foreign number, right, which is international number, or using a domestic number which has been spoofed using the IP-PABX switch, which is existing in that particular country. Then when you enter our jurisdiction, then an user won't know from where the call came, whether it came from the international number or whether it came from the local number, because the CLI that he is going to see is going to be a local CLI, though the call has entered from international jurisdiction or the gateway, and is now the consumer is receiving international calls as if that it
Right.
is a local call.
Thank you for explaining, the nuances of it and explaining it so well. And before I let you go, one question that I do want to ask you is, what is the way out? We've understood, why the government, operators, and others have not been able to, help people, stop receiving these spam calls. But what's the way out? Is there a solution possible in the Indian context where you have, all kinds of users, 5G users, 3G users, 2G users?
See, look, the problem that we are facing in our country is that we are coming out with regulations to contain and prevent anybody making a call and fraud and defrauding an user, so that the onus is, the government is trying to basically come out with a system where nobody can even make a call, and if anybody makes a call, he will be penalized. But I think this is
Right.
not the solution. The solution is something different.
Okay.
The solution has to be to empower the user so that he or she can really understand whether the call that he is receiving is in the category of trustworthy or cannot be trusted. So that is, the contextual information has to be given to the user so that user can make his or own judgment. Now, what has happened is that there are various kinds of mechanism which has come out in the country. For example, let's take the example of Bharti. Bharti has come out with an AI-based system where
Yeah.
the calls are marked as whether spam or not spam. But sometimes what happens is that when you're marking the call, you are not giving enough context. Sometimes your genuine calls are also getting marked as spam, right? So the user is getting confused. So this is not the solution. The solution is that you have to empower the user so that the user can trust the caller.
What does that
Whether,
mean when you say empower
uh,
the user? For
let
example,
me
you and I use mobile phones, right? So, what do you mean by empowering the user?
the empowering the user means the user has to be given contextual information whether.
So, if the call I'm getting is, let's say, from a bank, and it happens to be the bank that I have a savings account with, in that case, that information, instead of just suspected spam, should be flashed on my screen.
No, I'm basically not meaning
Okay.
that. See,
Okay.
identifying a call, use whether it is a spam or not spam, if it is done opaquely without any context, it doesn't serve any purpose. Let's say if you are able to empower the user by giving him location information. Let me explain what I basically mean. Let's say if the call is coming from an international territory, right? It is entering the country using a gateway. Now, if the consumer knows that this is an international call, though the CLI is a local number, but it is coming from international gateway, he will be more cautious in handling the call, right? Because he'll know that it is a 9-8 call, but it is coming from international gateway means that somebody who is trying to say that, look, I am calling, I am a TRAI agency calling, but I'm basically coming entering the India through international gateway. So I will not trust the identity. I'll simply reject that call because the information will be provided at me. It not that spam or not spam. It is coming from international gateway. Similarly, India is divided into 22 circles, right?
Mhm.
What we have been attempting to do, we are trying to mark a call as spam or not spam. That is not the way. If suppose if somebody, if TRA is dialing from Assam, right, and if the operator can establish the information and say that, look, this call originated from Assam circle, and this guy is trying to say that, I am so and so, I'm calling and I'm going to give you this, right, or whatever he's trying to sell or trying to basically fool you with plans or digital arrest or whatever. The location itself is going to empower the user with enough contextual information to judge whether the call can be trusted or not. That is a solution is which is basically going to resolve the situation to a large extent, though it is not going to fully resolve the solution problem, because location information is very difficult to spoof. You cannot spoof the location information. Very difficult. It cannot be done, right? Identity can be spoofed, KYC can be spoofed, location information cannot be spoofed. So
Right.
I am not asking you to give location information on a city basis or a BTS basis. You can at least give information on the circle basis. So this whole AI system, where you are basically marking the call as spam or not spam, which is creating more confusion. If they are able to mark the call that whether the call is originating from an international gateway, whether the call is originating from the circle, then the person who is trying to uh, fraud or create confusion within the mind of the caller, he or she is going to be much more careful because his identity is going to get exposed. That is the contextual information which I'm talking about.
Right. So you're saying essentially that in the first place, ensure that numbers are given to people with, verifiable and authentic proofs of identity, and at the next level, provide more contextual information like location, and that should be able to address this problem. Are there any other things that can be done? I mean, from the point of view of an individual. So, for example, what can I do as an individual to ensure that all these spam calls that I get, I'm able to stop at least some of them, if not all of them?
So look, individuals need to get more empowered with knowledge. Sometimes what happens is that people are not educated enough to understand what they should be doing with these kind of calls. First of all, this whole campaign about empowering the users with understanding, know how to deal with spam calling is absolutely essential. So their government has to come out with a campaign, right? So that everybody who's a new user, old user, they should know that how to handle in incoming call. That is very, very important. The second important thing is that contextual information. Third, and you can say that idealistic solution, right, is a long-term solution where the world has to come together. They have to trust each other. We have to have agreement through to our we have to have an integrated agreement to all other countries, so that any caller who is originating from the other country, his identity is being verified, so that end-to-end identity verification can take place, which is a very, very difficult task to do. It's a long shot. Countries like
Right.
US, etc., they are trying to do it. What they're doing is that most of the robocalls that are originating in US today is not originating from US within the domestic territory. They are originating from European countries, right? So
Okay.
what they're trying to do, they're trying to basically come out with some kind of legal arrangement with the European countries to prevent such origination from the international gateway. So international gateway management is very, very crucial. Apart from domestic gateway management, which is you can manage because you've got plenty of provisions and laws, etc. You can scare people. You can basically pull down their
Yeah.
businesses. You can do that, but you
Yeah.
cannot manage international gateways, right?
Yeah.
So that is where the maximum focus should be.
Right, right. And that, like you said, is a long shot and is a long-term solution. Ideal, and that's why you also qualified that by saying that it's the ideal solution. But of course, it'll take time and it's a long shot because it needs coordination between multiple countries. On that note, though, thank you for clarifying and thank you for sort of, helping us understand the technicalities involved.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.